Right, this is going to be another banter give and go with me and Maui here. As you have seen, we're trying it a bit scuffed to start with. As we did say when we launched this podcast, it was never going to be like a weekly podcast. And I actually also think for the playoffs, it's actually been really tricky to schedule if people don't know, because the issue is like, obviously, I actually think the scheduling in the playoffs at the moment in the NBA is a nightmare. Like, so you have some series that are starting when other series still haven't ended, which is mad, depending on what conference you're in. I also think, actually, by the way, I'll tell you where we can start this, actually. One thing I would say at the outset, look, we will actually talk about the Western Conference Finals, which we didn't do that much of. We just sort of started it in the last episode, and now obviously the finals themselves are almost over. But one thing I would actually just say is that's one area I would even start the discussion, which is, dude, I think they really messed up by making the gap between the end of the conference finals and the start of the NBA finals so long. Bro, I'd have to check how many days it was, but it felt like it was like quite a lot of, if I had to guess, I think it was like 5 or 6 days, mate. Like, I think that was a massive mistake. Like, if they'd have gone straight into that game one of like the Mavs Celtics immediately, like, I think the hype was pretty big actually when the Mavs made it there. Whereas I felt like by the time the actual finals started, for me, they actually had sort of like a lot of that hype went away. It's actually a thing, if you don't know, Maui, I often try to make a point to people in games like League of Legends as to why I think league formats aren't very good for esports. Because like right now, obviously, at the time of recording this, if people don't know, we're all watching Blast, the tournament that ends the season in CS2, right? And one of the things I've always thought is mega, it's not just the game, it's the fact that like there is like a momentum of the narrative hype that builds as an event goes on. Like the awesome thing now, for example, we're filming this after the semi-finals. Like if you've been watching Navi's run, it'd be very different type of hype if you had like 4 days between each match and then like a week between one of the series or something. Like it's the fact that you get to see them like power up as it goes. Because I actually feel like turning that did, even though obviously it's the actual matches not being good in the finals has like sucked some of the gravitas out of it. I also think like for me, like they should have just gone straight into that one. I'm sure. Am I wrong on this, Maui? I'm sure back in the day it was only like 2 or 3 days before you went to the next series. Like I feel like the gap was way shorter in the past.
I don't know why the gap is so long. It was a week. It's a week.
Right, there you go. That's a long time.
Long.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Game 5 between the Mavs and the Timberwolves was May 30th, and the final started on June 6th. So that's exactly 1 week after.
Right.
I mean, 6 days of rest. That's yeah, it kind of feels like it's lost a little bit of steam like that. I also think that this is actually exactly why the NFL will always just rule, because it's just do or die. Every match matters, and that the viewership for American football is so much greater than the NBA, because you don't really need to watch every single match and still have a very good idea of what's going on in a series. Like if you watch like one game of this, sure, it's not enough. That's not representative, but like you watch 2 or 3, you watch 3 of a 7-game series, you have a pretty good idea of what's happening, because there's not that much crazy variance game to game. Like the same people are generally scoring the most, same people are rebounding. It's like you might get the X factor game, and usually in the NBA, the X factor game is just that someone like Derek Lively hits 6 threes. You know, like that's the craziest thing that'll usually happen, except for very rare cases where it's like huge series have like giant swings in terms of like massive comebacks or something like that. Like, you know, the 3-1 down kind of meme in terms of the Cavs coming back from 3-1 down, like 100% of the time before that one, you would have said, okay, I watched 2 games of the series of watching the Warriors win. I'm done. I don't need to watch anymore.
Sure. Right, okay, let's rewind a bit, because as I said, we'll comment on the Western Conference Finals. Like, there's nothing to say about the Eastern Conference Finals, sadly. Although I will say, I'll tell you an angle that's aged really poorly. Like, I can't remember how it was phrased, but I saw an amazing tweet I did like a retweet of, where someone just did a really good parody of like how people have been characterizing this Celtics team the whole time, where it was like, well, you know what? They're doing well against this Mavs team, but they're never going to fucking win in the next round if they keep playing like this, because that's what everyone said about them the whole time. And the joke is they could actually have just swept this bloody final and already won the championship. So if we rewrite to the Western Conference Final, which I will point out, because there was so much hate on the Celtics, most people were actually taking it, whoever wins the Western Conference Final is going to be the champion of the NBA. So actually, some people were hyping the Timberwolves. They looked great after they played the Nuggets. Obviously, the Mavs themselves, the way they won the Western Conference Final, obviously made their stars look really good, right? The one thing I would start with this, Maui, is this. If you go back, one thing I said that aged very well on the last episode is, even though I actually do think in the context of the word team, like the notion of like a unit, I do actually think that the Timberwolves is a better team than the Mavs. But the difference is, one, I mean, you saw it. Like, the problem is, even though in the finals this is aged badly, the Mavs star players are more reliable than the Timberwolves one, because the Timberwolves ones are like flawed people like Karl Anthony Towns, or just very young player like Anthony Edwards, who inevitably, if you've never watched CS, by the way, there's another analog for you. You just know that the rookie falls off as the tournament goes on. They don't just get better. Like the idea someone actually does a donk so inexplicable and unlikely, even in pro sports. So what I would say to start with here is this, Maui. My take of why I actually didn't favour the Wolves against the Mavs is because I actually think that line is true. I actually do think if you look at the Wolves, they look as though they were built to beat a team like the fucking Nuggets or the Bucks or something. The problem they have was they do have an amazing defense, but it's sort of the wrong defense for the Mavs. Like the Mavs really is. You want what the Celtics. You want all the perimeter defenders, mate. You want all the short people who can run around and stay in front of someone and make him take a tough shot. Because that massive front line, which looked so good against the Nuggets, actually was pretty ineffective. It looked like against the Mavs, mate.
The one guy that I really thought was going to do better defensively in the Western Conference Finals was Jaden McDaniels. Again, I talk about this guy a good amount. He was the frequent defender for Luka, and even though size-wise, length-wise, he should have been bothersome, he was just, like height-wise. It's like height-wise and wingspan-wise, I thought he was going to be able to deal with Luka. He wasn't clearly able to do it in terms of physicality. Like, Luka is good enough at maneuvering his body around Jaden McDaniels that the extra 50 pounds, like I looked it up, the 50 pounds that Luka has on Jaden McDaniels played a significant factor in terms of, he can just kind of bop him around. Like
no, but it's because it's like, here's the funny thing, right? I actually think Jokic is like deceptively fat. I don't think he actually, if you look at the way he moves and stuff, it looks to him like it doesn't affect him. Luka, it actually does look for real like he moves slow. Like mate, if you saw him when he first came to the NBA, he was way thinner than this. Like when you say 50 pounds, that's like he's playing one-on-one with you, but he has like one of those like vests they wear in the military, you know, like a weighted vest. Like, fucking hell, he's playing on hard mode. 50 pounds, man alive.
50 pounds heavier. Like, McDaniels is
McDaniels is pretty jacked. He looks pretty good too. It's like 50 pounds on this guy. Fucking hell.
Jaden McDaniels is 6'9", 185. And Luka, on the other hand, is a couple inches shorter. He's 6'7", but he's 230. So
if people don't know, that's like LeBron-esque. The difference is LeBron looks like a Greek god. Luka looks like the guy watching him on TV.
If you just like, I mean, if you ever saw somebody that was 50 pounds heavier than you, even if they were 4 inches shorter than you're like, I'm not messing with that guy. Like, I'm not even gonna try to. I don't want to say anything mean to that guy because he could just bop me out easily. Like, doesn't matter that he had better wingspan or anything like that. Luka is just such a crafty player when it comes to just like using his low center of gravity, getting the defender off balance, and then McDaniel's just that little bit of separation, and then just like the most casual kind of like Dirk knee up sort of step out or fadeaway shot. That's all he needed to do, or he would just kind of bump him. I will say this that I don't like about Luka's game a lot is that it is very much so predicated on the fact that the offensive player has so much more in terms of options than the defender.
He is fully on that Harden shit of just abusing all the offensive rules. He is. He's ridiculous, mate. He is.
And it looks great. Like, the Luka fans love the moments where Luka uses footwork to outmaneuver his defender, or he's able to blow by them, or he has these like behind the back passes and stuff like that. Like, he can look so crafty, but he has that same Harden element where he just will always just kind of bump people, and he's kind of just abusing the rules as much as he can. And the problem with it, and I think why the eye test has been so bad for Luka, is that he's foul baiting all the time, as he was on McDaniels and basically people in the Celtics games. But then when he doesn't get a call, and he gets a lot of calls, he's an incredibly friendly whistle. He always complains. Like, he led the season this year in technical fouls. I didn't even know that until
crazy.
I was like, I was kind of thinking like, okay, surely he should be getting more than he is, because he is screaming at refs. He's screaming at them, like saying like when he in game 3 it was, when he was about to foul out, he yelled at his bench. He said, "You better fucking challenge that," like word for word. That's what he said.
Even though he's wrong, by the way, if people don't, which is also obnoxious.
Oh yeah, he was wrong, and he made him waste their last challenge of the game, by the way, which they maybe could have used to actually save a possession later on. But either way, like he's just it's so hard to root for somebody like that sometimes, because like Harden, they both have such great finesse and ability when they're not just bogged down by the fact that they're trying to ref bait all the time. And I will even say this, like, Harden didn't complain. Harden complained a decent amount to refs. Luka complains more than anybody I've ever seen. Like,
I'm with you on that.
I can't, but like, he complained, like, you know, all these superstars of recent memory. I think of like the Kawhis, the Durants, LeBron, Harden, Curry. Like, Curry doesn't complain that much. Draymond was the guy that was complaining for him, but it was like like Durant got a lot of technicals actually. LeBron doesn't get a lot of technicals, but he kind of like talks with the ref more. Luka's he's screaming at the refs and he gets the technicals, which is funny to me. So yeah, either way, coming back to the Western Conference Finals though, yeah, unfortunately, we didn't see the power up from Anthony Edwards. That was kind of like how I envisioned it, how I dreamed it up.
Sure.
But I will say the one take I had before that series started where I picked the T-Wolves to win was that I said two things. One, I said if you like basically gun to my head, you gave me 25, 25, 25, 25 odds on all the remaining four people in both conference finals. I said I would relinquish the fact that I think the Celtics are the most likely to win, but I wanted the story of the Wolves to culminate in a huge kind of fairy tale run where they just power up throughout the season in a way that I didn't expect. And yeah, Edwards just didn't really have, I dare say it, like the killer instinct. Like the Mavs defenders sometimes doubled him, and then he would give the ball to another player, and that's it. He's done with the possession. He doesn't look for the ball again. And I think that's one thing that he needs to look back on after the season's over, or really when they look back at that tape. It's how do you stay a threat on offense when you don't have the ball in your hands? Because he's not enough of an off-ball threat like some of the greats of recent memory. I think that like Durant, Kawhi, Curry all do a much better job. When they lose the ball, they start running around the court. They take a curl, they take a screen somewhere, and then they're able to find the ball again in the same possession. Even Luka just claps, like he'll pass the ball and he'll just clap for the ball back again. Like he'll immediately try to get it back because he knows that, he should be doing that. And I think Edwards needs to realize, like, you are the only guy that can truly create off the dribble on our team. So you need to bail us out if we got 4 seconds left in a shot clock. You can't pass it to one of these guys because McDaniels doesn't have any moves.
Yeah, well, we'll do the Western Conference Finals, and we can do some of that. Like, I'll save my criticisms of the Mavs players for the finals for obvious reasons, because it looks like they're going to lose. So what I would say about the Wolves players is this. First of all, the player who actually the most let them down is Karl Anthony Towns. Like, mate, not only did he not have a very good series, but the thing that I thought was most criminal, and people are going to think this is like boomer sports ball take, but it's not. It's just how basketball works, which is, his whole claim to fame, Maui. I believe he even said something like in an interview this year, something like, I'm the best shooting big man of all time. Or so. Didn't he say some quote like that? Well, here's the problem with that. I actually want to tell him, and that's the reason you're not in the finals, you idiot. Like, in this scenario, he had situations where, like, people need to understand. Like, I'll give you the obvious, like, a comparison point. If people don't know, the player Kevin Garnett, actually in his prime, was an amazing mid-range shooter. He had even though it looked like a frozen rope, it wasn't like a great arc. He was really good at, like, sort of, I'm going to guess, like 12 feet or something like that, And as a result, even though he's this really long, lanky guy, if people don't know, he really would do sort of like a Michael Jordan, like fadeaway jump shot. He was really good. But the difference is, if he was playing someone, I mean, I can tell you he did this when he played the Lakers with Pau Gasol. If he's playing Pau Gasol, he's going to go down on the block, mate, and punish him. He's going to like fucking play physically. He's going to basically see, right, my edge here is not only am I really tall, but you don't want it. You don't want physical play. The problem I have in this series was Karl Anthony Towns just happened to shoot all day, mate. Like, he could have absolutely done exactly that. He could have literally been like the player who forced mismatches, take smaller players, and just beat them up a bit. But instead, it's like in his mind, I think he really did imagine he was just going to bomb in 3-pointers and long twos and just be the hero, like, because one of the problems you have in basketball, it might sound weird, but I've noticed there's a weird thing where all the big men, it's why actually the small ball era suits them. All the big men secretly wanted to shoot and handle the ball anyway. They're on like that shit of like, the famous concept in culture of like Western women, which is like, if their hair's naturally straight, they just obsess about like curling it and getting curls. But the joke is the woman with the curls, she's like straightening it out to like get like the north, like they do the thing where it's like grass is always green, like whatever the other woman has that I don't have, I must have that because that must be the next. It's like he does that. So that was first of all a bummer. It's why also, if you notice, I wasn't riding with the Wolves because unfortunately I do think Karl Anthony Towns is going to go down as one of the most underwhelming players of his generation. Like, I actually think, like, when he says those comments in interviews, he's not a total idiot. Like, the potential is there. He is mega talented. I even remember back in the day when he first came in the league, he did look like he could like sleep and be like an amazing player, but he's kind of rested on his laurels. And then on the Anthony Edwards one, I don't have too many like criticisms of him overall. He's so young, guys. Like I say earlier, this is why I gave the example of like in Counter-Strike. Unless you really are the extremely rare donk, or I mean, mate, even Morrissey was actually more like Anthony Edwards now. You have some series you carry, you look amazing. Well, wait, this guy's way better than you expect for his years. But then you give him enough time. Like, here's the real problem Anthony Edwards has is if he'd have lost game 7 to the Nuggets, he could have looked like what an insane player over that whole run.
Yeah.
But because he survived and he had to play a whole extra series, bro, he was garbage in the first 2 games. He was just nothing left in the tank. And also, I actually do think I agree with you, considering everyone was given these Michael Jordan analogs of like, he's just got the same kid. He's like Kobe and Jordan, like he's a closer. Yeah, he kind of was. But I also think for real, once he got to the Western Conference Finals, he had that vibe. And I think the Timberwolves as a team had this vibe, mate, of like, this is good enough. They had that thing of like, hey, we've had a really good run, which is like, that's where the killer instinct is like different. Like, look, I'm not saying there's many people have been like this. There are very few. They are the Michael Jordans, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, etc. But there's a reason why those people are bona fide legends, because they don't just go, awesome job, guys. Yeah, great win. Like, we're done. Like, they just want to win the fucking championship. So it just shows why, like, you can never go you can't, like, skip 5. Same way I always say about Zimu. You can't skip 5 years and give them all the crown already and give them all you're the best player ever. You are Michael Jordan. Like, no, the joke is in this analogy, you're Michael Jordan in, like, I don't know, 1985 or something. Like, you're the beginning Michael Jordan. When we say Michael Jordan, we mean like the finished product who closes the whole game out and does everything. So I think it's actually justified the way that series went. Right? Do you have anything more on Wolves or anything?
Yeah, that I feel like a more modern analogy for a player that I would want to compare him to, and this is not related at all to the way he carries himself outside of the court. Like Anthony Edwards, to me, he's kind of a little bit reminiscent of Kawhi, actually, where his gameplay is like pretty good lockdown, pretty good perimeter defender. Kawhi was better, but then he also kind of can just create mid-range shots off the dribble and has some pretty great athletic finishing abilities. And they're both like all right 3-point shooters. I'm not going to say neither of them are like. There's been some sharp shooting streaks for Kawhi in his career, but it's kind of like, I would be surprised if Edwards by the end of his career doesn't have a very similar 3-point percentage as someone like Kawhi. But the thing is that the difference in their upbringing or when they were brought into the league is that Kawhi was surrounded by former champions. He got to play with Parker, Duncan, Ginobili, and obviously Popovich coaching him at the same time. Whereas on the other hand, the Timberwolves, there's not really a veteran voice that I would expect that is going to really help out with Edwards' development, because that would be someone like Mike Conley, but like Mike Conley hasn't even really.
He hasn't really done anything himself, has he? Come on, exactly. Yeah.
He made one All-Star team, and like it's not like the Timberwolves have some like legendary super sick coach that's storied behind them either. And so yeah, I think that definitely could have affected the way that he moved forward. And I feel like what would have been cool is like I don't know if I'd really necessarily want Jason Kidd to actually be the Timberwolves coach, but I feel like he's someone that like aspired a little bit more to greatness and probably could have imparted some wisdom to Edwards in a way that maybe Edwards could be a little bit more aggressive. Right. He could have a little bit more of a killer instinct, because you look at the way that Doncic carries himself compared to like behind Kidd, with Kidd behind him. It's almost like Kidd has to reel him in. It's like you're going too crazy. You're doing too much. Like you're trying to be everything. You're getting too upset because you're trying to be everything. Whereas on the other hand, it's like Edwards is like, what they should be telling him is like, you need to do more. Like they need to meet, both of those two guys, Edwards and Doncic, probably need to meet in the middle somewhere. Doncic probably needs to look for his teammates a little bit more, and Edwards probably needs to look for himself a little bit more.
I've got a question as we transition and talk about the finals. So we just need to put all the cards on the table, because I'm getting sick of people playing this get out of jail free game. And it goes like this. So when, like, for example, the Western Conference Finals, or in game 3, even this game we just saw the finals now, when Luka actually has a good game, especially defensively, everyone does that thing of like, wow, is he actually snubbed for the all defensive team? But the second he has a bad game, Maui, what they say is, but he's injured. So I want to ask you this. Like, from what you are seeing now, does he look injured? Is he injured to any degree? What's your take on that? Because I feel like I couldn't believe it was one of those like minor injuries, but I don't know if I believe it, Maui, because the problem is, like I say, like, it's not like when he's getting beat on defense, it looks like it's because he's injured. It looks like because those are the games he's lazy. Like, that's one of his problems as a player, in my opinion. I think sometimes he just has games where he just doesn't put in all the hustle, you know? What do you think? Is he actually injured? It's tough, right?
Well, I'm kind of confused when the injury started, because
people claim it was even back in the first series. I think people said in the Clippers series he had like some sort of, I can't remember what the specific injury was, but they said he had something going on. I think they said his hand was injured or something. And obviously there was that moment where he had like blood coming through his fucking shorts at some point or something. I can't remember what the specific thing is though.
Okay, so I found the stats on this one, which was like a fun defensive stat point, because I wasn't sure that it's like Luka's defense has been bad for the entire time. Like, he's got the highest blow-by percentage allowed on drives in a series for the last 10 years in 3 different series now. I think he owns 1, 2, and 3 for highest blow by percentage ever
hell.
allowed. Was with before yesterday, before Friday's game 4, he had a 67.7% of the attempts on blow-bys they got right by him, the Celtics. In the Clippers series, it was 65.2%, and in the Thunder series, it was 59%. And so if he's injured for the entire playoff series, and so at this, see, I don't know what the people that really are just harping on the fact that he's injured want you to say. Do you want me to say right now, like, do they want the entire public to say he would be the best player ever of all time by a large margin if he's not injured? Like, no, like yes, this season for defense he looked a little bit better, but to me it was like, it's like when the Mavs decide to lock in, I can see it for these brief windows. Like the closeout game against the Clippers, I thought Kyrie played good defense. I thought that Luka played commendable defense. I would say like average for an NBA player. I think he played average defense for an NBA player, aka he got some stops at all. Kyrie to me was playing better defense overall in that one. And then versus the Wolves, he looked okay, but I also feel like the Wolves just didn't have enough options for offensive players. Like, it's not like I expect really like some of the backup players on the Wolves to necessarily even like create a mismatch with Luka and then take him off the dribble or something like that. That's just like not really what they do. And that's kind of why it was sad that Cat fell apart so hard, because it's like, where are the people that are playing to punish? You know, like those people need to be playing to punish him a little bit more. And that's why the Celtics are so scary. And so to get back to your original question, is Luka injured right now? I would say, yeah, he's injured. Like, it's not even fair. It's not fair to say he's not injured, but I also think that, like, if he is, like, in terms of what I have seen from him for such a long stretch of time, including games in the season when he wasn't supposedly injured, it's not like it's like this night and day difference. He still takes possessions off on defense very consistently. He's still doing it in the playoffs, as I'm used to him doing. And so could we get maybe like 5 points less scored per game by the Celtics if he weren't injured? Sure, because he'll maybe stop 1 or 2 possessions that would have been blow-bys otherwise. But I don't think it's necessarily like a game-determining outcome that is throttling the Mavs' chances here.
What I find weird is, like, if you notice, this was the same playoffs where people tortured the stats and found stuff like, yeah, but look, his actual, like, field goal percent shot against him isn't that high. And it's like, right, guys, if you're trying to find a stat to tell you he's playing really awesome defense, what are we doing? Use your fucking eyes. You can see he's not. Yeah. Like, you can see people just beating him and tearing him up, and like he's not the player where it's like, oh God, they've swapped Luka onto him. It's going to shut him down on this player. That's not how it is. In fact, if anything, I actually think one of the problems they're having in the finals is the other way around. It's actually that the Celtics defense is really effective against the Mavs. Meanwhile, the Mavs are completely ineffective. So as a result, the Celtics do just cruise to these wins where it's not even a closest game. On the Luka one as well, I want to make this point because one thing I'm so bored of with stans and like super fans is, mate, these are the people, you know how obnoxious they are in our field in Counter-Strike, but same in sports. Super fans are incredibly obnoxious when they think they have like the truth or the facts or the stats on their side, right? They'll never go, they'll never temper a statement. So here's the problem you have is Luka fans for real, bro, are sort of being pussies right now, and here's why. They should logically be doing a Ziwu stan approach, even though I wouldn't like it. Because here's the problem, mate. Bear in mind, they don't take into account what I do, which is I consider most of the stats, especially points per game, incredibly inflated because of the rule changes and stuff. If you don't do that, if you do what modern day people do, where you just take those stats classically, you know, hey, only 4 people in history have ever put up this stat line. You know, like that thing they do on ESPN, where you find that, like, oh, look, it was like Elgin Baylor, Dr. J, Michael Jordan, and then what the hell, like, you know, fucking, except the joke is it'll be like, fuck it, like Carl Anthony Towns or something, you know, like something where it's like, that's not even the best player. Right, here's what I don't get. You know, they're all saying on the Luka one, oh, you know, maybe he should be MVP. No, guys, it's worse than that. If you believe these stats are for real, and you believe all these things are totally legit, like 30 points a game's correct, he's almost on a triple-double for like every fucking season, he's all NBA, first team, every team, you should actually argue the other way. You shouldn't be going like he's pretty good. You should be saying literally he's one of the 5 best players in the history of basketball. Like, you know, that would be one of the best starts like ever to a career for like accolades. That would be bonkers. So that's why, in my opinion, I actually think he's an example, a bit like how I always say for me, Jim is the best example to show there's flaws with how the HLTV rating works, because you can see Jim have a 1.30 rating game, but when you load it up, spoiler, it isn't like a simple demo, is it? You don't watch it like, oh my God, what's he doing? You just watch it like, oh, what the fuck that? You actually just realize how cynical that rating can be. It's like, oh, he saved again. Oh, he just got like 1 kill and traded out his teammate and saved the AWP. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you watch it.
13, 6 6 in a game that he wins
Yes.
like 13-10 because on all the rounds that he lost, he just wasn't involved at all.
So basically, my problem is it's a little bit similar with Luka. People don't know, I am actually a fan of his. I think he's a really fucking amazing player to watch. He's mega exciting and definitely one of the most entertaining. But I do feel like people don't really know where the fucking limit stops. Because if these numbers were real, guys, he would just be the best player. Like, you know that thing of like, is he better than well, these are better than Larry Bird numbers. So if you want, and by the way, Larry Bird's fucking like the best player every season. So like, I feel like people don't know where to come down on that one. Because actually in the finals, I do think you've seen a lot of his flaws exposed, mate. In fact, I even think, like I alluded to, it was actually game 4, you're right, not game 3. I actually think, if anything, this last game when he was about to be eliminated, it looked like he actually played defense for once. It looked like he was actually oh, fuck. But I actually played now to win. And I just want to be like, bro, where was that for the first 2 games? Like, I agree with you. If you'd have played like that, like, remember, I don't know that you could actually win this final. I actually do think the Celtics is just a better team. I actually think, by the way, when we get to them, they're one of the best GM teams I think I've ever seen. Like, that's just like a guy playing fucking fantasy NBA. He's just moving pieces around like a computer game, and he's made the best of the roster. But, mate, like, this at least could have been like a competitive series. Like, there should have been some games the Mavs could have won here.
I mean, I would have expected that. I feel like the way that the defense matches up so well with Kyrie has been also something that, like, he's been
they've shut him out completely, mate.
Yeah, game 3 was his best game, and then they didn't even win it. And then game 1 and 2, he just kind of was a non-factor. And also, I just feel like there's just no one. There was, in the first 2 games, there was practically nobody to really deal with Porzingis. Also, like that dude just looked like Porzingis looked like the white Kevin Durant in this series for a bit. Like, anytime he just wanted to pull up on anything, it was just like the most free shot ever. So yeah, there's a lot of the matchups in this one feel very bad, but I think that's more credit to the Celtics. Like, I don't see anybody really matching up that well with them. Like, I don't even see, if the Timberwolves were here, I struggled to see, like, where does Mike Conley even go in this? Like, what does Rudy Gobert, all he does is stops, like, some of these Tatum and Brown drives? Like, because there's so much shooting on the Celtics. Like, the Celtics can, like practically everybody is always a threat on the floor, at least in this playoff, or in these finals. Like, I feel like that's kind of the scariest thing about them, is that it felt like this, like I want to say, like, 7-ish years ago, it felt like every time there was a draft, like, there weren't always these, like, crazy standout unicorn type players. So what you did is, like, if you ever had like the picks 4 through 10 or whatever it was in the NBA draft, you would just kind of like take the randomly tall wing athletic player, and that's sort of what the Celtics did for a period of time with getting they got Jaylen Brown, I think at was it number 7 in the draft or something like that, and then they got Tatum at I think it was like a top 5 pick or something like that to pick 3. He was number 3 in the draft, and so it was like they just kind of went for it, and it just worked out. Like, they just got 2 guys who can simultaneously work together. It was kind of like a weird narrative in the beginning when they were playing together. It's like, oh, can 2 forwards play together? It's like, yes, the answer is yes. Like, it's not that hard, actually. Like, at the beginning when Kuminga and Wiggins were playing together for the Warriors, it was like 10 games of them being really bad, but then they just figured it out. It's not that hard to get 2 athletic wings to play with each other, especially if they can shoot. Like, it's not like the old days where it's like they all need a slash or whatever. Either way, I'm just like with this Celtics roster, you can't hide Luka on defense. Like, if we want to bring it back to him, Luka was able to hide on defense against Gobert in the Timberwolves series. Like, there's nothing that Gobert can do if he's more than 3 feet away from the basket that can punish Luka if he gets the ball. Like, Luka's got a really low center of gravity, and also like Gobert doesn't have any bag. He has no offensive bag, which is why he's wrongly labeled as a bum, even though he's the best defensive player in the league. And so now Luka always has to have somebody to play against, and also there's always a shooting threat. And so, like, the Celtics, 1, play way better offense. They have such a great motion to their offense, and 2, if they catch somebody in a bad switch, they're just going to attack them most of the time. Like, if Brown or Tatum get, like, Luka or Kyrie in a switch, they just go at him. Like, there's no question. They're just going to score, except for game 4, where Luka finally started to play defense, and also the Celtics really slowed down their offense.
Like I say, I actually think the real joke is, even though this is just a meme, you obviously couldn't do this, it has to be a player. The joke is the MVP of the finals just is the Celtics GM. Like, the Celtics GM has just God-moded this whole playoffs, because I know people, right? I think actually half the narrative of the Celtics is just the shit from last season where they fucked up against the Heat and didn't get to the finals. Like, people are wanting to hate on them for that, but this season they look way more poised. And I actually think if you look at their team this season, first of all, I agree. Like, offensively, they're mega too. Not only do they have an insanely deep team, like, bro, their team for real goes like 8 names deep. You know what I mean? Like, they're not just one with like a couple of scorers. Like, it's like you said about that, mate. I'll even take the narrative people were using against the Celtics and spin it the opposite way. So, you know, the narrative went, this didn't count, except now when they win the finals, because all the stars of the teams they were playing kept getting injured, right, in the Eastern Conference run, right? Yeah. But here's what people aren't adding in. I notice no one then goes ... and if those players hadn't been injured, they'd have beaten the Celtics. No, because here's the stupid thing, guys. Right. Even if those stars play, they're going to lose. Like, this Celtics team would have beaten every single team. Like, I don't care how much you like fucking Brandon Mitchell or fucking Jaylen Brunson. None of these players would have been enough to win against this team, because not only is it actually, like, first of all, the spacing looks fucking mega. It's why the joke of the Tatum angle, you know, everyone's going hard as fuck on Tatum, right? Look, absolutely, he shouldn't be the finals MVP, and he's obviously shot like shit. But I'll tell you what, if someone's going to shoot like shit, he does run the offense, though. Like, he actually does penetrate and kick the ball out and draw the defender in. He like does do what you'd want them to do. And by the way, that's how cracked the Celtics are. The on-paper player that was supposed to be their Kobe, obviously that's aged like milk now, first of all, doesn't even have to be, and they're winning at a canter. And as you say, with actually the player that was going to put them over the top, Porzingis, he only came for 5 minutes, had a cup of coffee, won him a game and fucked off, and they're still winning by like fucking 20 points or something. Like, this team is just actually bonkers. Like, and then by the way, like I say, this is why I actually wanted the Nuggets to be the team that played them, because the other problem is then they have mega defense. It's like, mate, they just give it to you on both sides. Like, I actually want to ask people who are hating on Tatum, because by the way, it is legit. Like, obviously he's played like shit in the finals, but I actually want to tell them, you are aware if he turned up and played normal, there wouldn't even be a fucking finals. It'd be over already. Like, the joke is the actual Celtics team. Look, I already am starting to try to look like historically, this has to be one of the deepest teams I've seen play in the NBA, mate.
I mean, they have 8 legitimate players. Like, that's 8, like, players that probably, if one of them got injured, I would say if you lost Jaylen Brown, you'd be in a really bad situation. True. If you lost Tatum, you'd be in a really bad position. If you lost anybody else, I think you have a replacement. Like, to me, I think their third most important piece was probably Porzingis. But even like, I'm even kind of like wincing at saying that, because I'm like, well, Holiday's really good too.
Oh, he is mega, yeah. And by the way, isn't he kind of the guy who's also raised his stock this playoffs? You just see, like, he's just been a sleeper his whole career, hasn't he, that guy?
Yeah. And also then, like, even when Porzingis is injured, it's like Al Horford is totally fine too. Like there's no, I can't really like pick one person where I'm like, man, like,
do you know that has to be one of the weirdest glopes of all time? Is Al Horford, who, if people remember when he used to play on the Hawks, was like a fucking sort of banging forward type figure. The idea he would become like a 3-point sharpshooter is so fucking weird, isn't it? If you're like an old school fan. But he is. He's actually mega at shooting, and it's actually bonkers. He sort of nailed it.
There was, I mean, for the series they played against the Pacers, like, so many people, I think it was like 7 of their people were shooting above 30% from 3, though. So, like, that's, again, like, that's credit to the GMing for them, because everybody, if they are left wide open, that if there's a breakdown in your defense and you leave one of these guys in the corner, there's a good chance that's going in. Like, sure, they're not going to shoot it off the dribble, and that's why their percentages aren't better. But, like, when they're in the corner and they're set up for free, because the thing is, like, to also Brown and Tatum's credit, again, Tatum's getting he's getting bagged on a lot, but, like, when he just drives, he has a pretty nasty first step, and he has a decent, I'm not going to say a great, but a decent step back. And so people have to guard him close. He beats his first defender a lot of the time. There's a help defender that comes. He just swings the ball over to a guy in the corner, and it's just free. It's just a well-run offense. It's like, and also beyond that, like, people are moving. That's the one thing with Game 4 where the Celtics got battered. It's like they weren't even moving. I think their coach was definitely harping on them in one of the mic'd up moments. But then once they didn't really do anything. Like, they never really stood in, or they never really got moving. It's like a ton of just ISO plays and stuff. It was kind of stupid to watch, actually, for their offense in that game. But when they are running their offense, they are just carving people up. They're finding mismatches, or they're just finding an open man. The amount of points they get for free in the paint because there's a missed assignment or something on the Mavs, like, that's going to be their undoing. Like, I mean, even if we want to consider the fact that Mavs come back in this and win one more game, I just think if the Celtics play 90% the offense that they had been instead of like 50%, which they did in game 4, if they play 90% of what they did in game 1, 2, or 3, they're winning one of these series or one of these maps. Not maps. That's my counter.
Games.
Obviously they're games. Yeah, one of their games.
By the way, the reason I don't do that as well is just because luckily in League of Legends they're called games, not maps, obviously. So I've already programmed my brain on that one. It's all good. Yeah. Right, this is the one thing I have an issue with though, is it's funny that so much of the actual discussion, this is also one of the things I've learned is this is the first year I've seriously followed like NBA Twitter, not just like the odd Reddit thread and just seeing like YouTube comments or something. And as I've pointed out on past episodes, man alive, like if you think esports is bad, just wade into a real sport, mate. It's way worse. Like they don't like, this is one area where I take for granted some of the things I've been able to do in my own career. Like I have, because a lot of people have seen a million of my Thorin Thoughts videos. I actually have sometimes been able to like influence people to use certain analytical lenses or concepts. Some of them just don't exist in fucking these team sports, mate. Like one thing that's mad is on both teams, all the fans of the other team do is just obsess about the main star like it was a 1v1 game and just hate on him. So if you're a Mavs fan, you just go, yeah, but look at Tatum, he's about to win shooting 40% the bomb. What a shitter, which is true. But the point is, well, that's not why he's about to win. He's about to win because his team's so insane they don't even need him to score to win. That's pretty cracked. Same with the Mavs one. Like, is Luka playing like shit in the finals? Yeah, he's playing kind of bad and he's having his issues. But bro, are we just going to ignore Kyrie Irving? Like, did he even come to the finals? Like, mate, he was actually having a mad little career renaissance in the rest of this playoffs where he was looking the shit. He looked really good in odd games against the Clippers. He looked really good against the Wolves in a couple of games. Mate, that guy never turned up to these finals. Like, I actually do think he's the player that could have done so much for his stock. Even if you'd lost, but it'd been like, say he'd had 2 games where he just had a pop off. He had like a fourth quarter, he took over. Remember, he was supposed to also be like the closer on this team sometimes. He was supposed to have 2 mega players to close the game out. So I think Kyrie's absolutely just fucking abandoned his team. He just looked like shit in this finals, mate.
He's, other than this little bit of, he had a resurgence in game 3, but game 1 and 2, man, he just wasn't even I wouldn't even have trusted him with anything. Like, he was just such a non-factor for them, and like his efficiency was terrible too. Like he doesn't, and another big problem with Kyrie is that like if he's not scoring, he's not defending.
That's true.
So
yeah.
It's like then what is he there for? What is he gonna do at that point? Like that's why.
Dude, I'll give you a crazy stat. He's only attempted 7 free throws in the final. 7. Bro, a player like him should be at the line all day long. He's fucking weaving through the defense, doing all those crazy layups and shit. Like you'd think he'd be on the line every game. The fuck?
Oh yeah, totally. The fact that I mean, Doncic is like tripled his amount of free throw attempts. Even a couple other players on the team have more than him. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have that vicious energy where he's attacking everybody because he's not beating people with his first step nearly as easily. And so he's just kind of like he's either one settling or two. I mean, I've just been noticing he's in the Timberwolves series, he did such a good job of beating the guy on his first step or doing some move on the outside and then getting around him or just like setting himself up for a free, nice 3. But I noticed that like Kyrie's been just forcing threes. He's been he's 5 for 20 right now after 4 games of play, and he even had a really good third game. And it's just like he's taking all these shots where he's like fading to the left, fading to the right. He's not in his set shooting motion at all, and on at least those kinds of attempts. And the problem is that like the Mavericks are, I mean, the Celtics are so good at slowing him down that he's not attacking as strongly as he could be probably, but he's also just he's settling. He's just like if he doesn't beat them on his first step, he's just done. And the thing is that this is like the coaching difference between the Mavs and the Celtics, that even though Kyrie by and large can get so much more open than so many of these players on the Celtics one-on-one, he's taking much worse shots because there's no motion in this offense. Like this is to me one of the biggest problems of having a team that's designed around a single high usage superstar like Harden was for the Rockets, like Luka is now for the Mavs. They're both experiencing the same pitfalls, which is that because everybody on the Celtics thinks that Luka will be taking that shot or the ball will be going back to him, they don't really have to do anything. They don't have to do anything. And in fact, they actually can save a lot of their energy, which would normally be exerted trying to chase people down just on their own offense. So they can move a lot. They can just sprint around the court, set screens for each other. They're super active. And so when Kyrie is he's not beating anybody, but 2, it's like it's like he has to move so much on defense, and he's losing people all the time. He's losing his man. People are just shooting, they're getting free open shots with the most basic motion in the offense at all. And it's just like he can't keep up in this game. Yeah, he's like Kyrie is amazing when you're just talking like one-on-one or whatever, but the game's just not played like that. And then unfortunately in this high level team basketball setting, Kyrie, he feels a bit out of his element here. I'm not going to say he's a bum or anything like that, but he's definitely not as well equipped to be chasing people around, fighting through screens, and preventing an open look.
It's funny that people, just as a lazy, like, they are European angle, try to, like, conflate Jokic and fucking Doncic. Because to me, they're actually also incredibly different. Because, you know, I always criticize Jokic. That, like, sometimes I want him to take over the game and actually, like, abuse the fact he has, like, a mismatch or he's got a player. I actually think Doncic is the opposite. I think his problem is he settles for being inefficient way too much, mate. Because I agree with you. If you go and look, his usage numbers are fucking bonkers. Like for real, he plays like he is, like, prime Magic Johnson or something, guys. Like, he literally has the ball in his hand all the time. And then, yeah, at the end of the game, it is absurd. Everyone knows, like, the end of every single Mavs game ever is like a half court, really slow. The tempo goes to nothing. He stood there. Like, it's like every time he thinks he's taking the game winner, you know, like, you let the clock go down. You try and time it so there's 4 seconds on the clock. So you have to, it's like all that. But that's why I've always said, by the way, it's the one of the few things I don't fuck with him is before he was even in playoff series, he used to be the guy where he's like, try hard and way too much on the regular season game, and he's winning like a game against the Hawks in like February, but he's, you know, like he's just won the fucking like championship and made like the game 7 buzzer beater, you know. And it's like, listen, I fuck with that. But the problem is you're not going to do that in the playoff setting. Like, you've had a million of those chances this run, by the way. Like I say, every single fourth quarter is what I described. It's you just getting a chance to play hero ball and go and hit a million shots or whatever. And mate, here's another thing as well. Bear in mind, I say this as a Kobe fan. Someone I will totally admit had one of the worst shot selections of probably any great player ever, because he almost did it on ego that he like wanted to take the really hard shot.
AI.
Yeah, basically. Mate, fucking Luka could join the club, because this motherfucker loves losing games at the end of a fourth quarter, trying like a 38-foot 3-pointer with like the guy's hand in his face. It's like, listen, when those go in, yeah, in a movie, that's the shot you want to make. But in real life, when they miss and clang off the back, that's a bummer when you've seen that. Because the problem is when you've seen it happen too many times, Mo, you know it's about to happen. You're like, right, he's either about to do like the most memorable shot I'm going to see for a few years, or he's about to just back iron this bitch and the game's over. And also, that ties into what we talked about at the beginning. Mate, especially that game 3-1, the way he was trying to foul bait at the end of games. I want to just tell him, bro, this isn't even about superstar calls. No one gets these calls in the finals of the NBA. Like in the NBA finals at the end of a playoff game, they're not going to bail you out on like a 35-foot shot. Like, they're going to make it miss. Like, that's, like, if you never, I know he's never been in like this scenario, but like, fucking hell, bro, you got to level up on that one. Like, you can't be crying. Like, mate, that one where he like got slightly winged as he did the shot. But like, remember what you said earlier? He is like a 230-pound beast. But he was like an acrobat, bro. He was like practically like getting flipped like a fucking, woo! It's got like, come on, there's no way that guy could, like, it's not WWE. What's he put you off the turnbuckle or something? This is ridiculous. He's just baiting so much.
He can. The thing is that he can get some of the biggest people in the league off balance by bumping them. But if the smallest guy on the Celtics even grazes him, he just flies.
I love it.
It's so it is very LeBron-esque. You know, it's like, dude, you guys are two steaming locomotives. Like, the average human would just get absolutely torn apart by running into you in any respect at all, and you're acting like, I don't even know, like Derek White is somehow just like mauling you. It's like, shut up. Just shut up.
Also, by the way, you notice as well, the offense of the Mavs just doesn't work in the same way it did against all the other teams, mate. Like, one thing I actually thought was under key. I tell you one thing this Mavs run actually did show me is, I actually didn't think the Mavs were that well GM'd, but I actually think I was slightly wrong on that. Like, if you look at the series where they were winning, mate, they actually have, for the type of player I've just described Luka as, they did a very good job putting players around him. Like, think how many games is just people like fucking Daniel Gafford and Derek, like, just going to the basket all day long and just getting like a last-second alley-oop or just a throw in. Like, he actually did it for the rest of the series, except the finals. Actually, Luka was doing a pretty good job distributing, and he has the right players actually to be able to get that offense, but that hasn't happened in the finals, mate. There's the other thing. One of the reasons why everyone's tunneling on the stars of the Mavs is, what else have they got at this point? Like, all the depth is just evaporated off the bench.
Yeah. The it's just that everybody is, I feel like feel like it's a couple things. I feel like I feel like the defensive coverage is just really. I think one, the Celtics are playing great defense overall, but two, it's just that the flaws in some of the defenses by some of the other teams in the earlier Western Conference, I wouldn't have expected them to be bad, but it's just that I think it's because Luka and Kyrie can't necessarily create as well for themselves that they're not even upsetting the offense as much, and it just looks too static for me. Like, and I also will say, like, I never really expected like PJ Washington to be this third guy for the Mavs in a series that has all of this talent. So I think that's kind of the Mavs just they simply don't have that same level of depth. And like Derek Lively is was a great addition for the Mavs. Don't get me wrong. Also, like, he's really, really solid. And I think he probably will be a really solid player for them.
Oh, give him some time.
Couple years, but right now I don't think he's really. He just hasn't really developed much more than like what did he make, like one? I think he made his first 3 in Game 4 of the entire playoffs or something like that. I think they were celebrating that. There was a joke about that he made one. He took his. I think he took his first and he made his first and only.
Right.
And so it's like he's not a stretch threat or anything like that. And so he's also just not getting enough open looks because the Celtics are great defenders. There's not really the help. Like, I would be curious, like. I'm pretty sure, for example, and this is something that would give Luka some credit. If you swapped Luka for Jayson Tatum, I think that like and you put Luka on the Celtics, I still think that the Celtics win with Luka for Tatum, Tatum loses with it's not a 1-for-1 by any means. And even for that matter, I don't think Jaylen Brown, who's having a great series in my eyes. Actually, I will say this: Jaylen Brown's defense has been so good. It would elevate one side of the floor for the Mavericks if he were there instead of Luka. But it's just like, and what's so frustrating about it is that like that's kind of it. I think the offensive edge would still lie with the Celtics if they were to get Luka in this fantastical trade. But I also think like if Luka just played the same level of intensity on defense that he did in Game 4, it's like. He could do this. Like, he can be a leader on both sides of the floor. He just chooses not to. He just has so many little hiccups with getting frustrated at the refs and just kind of moaning at the little incidental contact that he thinks needs to be an obvious blatant foul every time. It's like, dude, you're already getting you're tied for the most free throw attempts in this series already, and you're like crashing into people a lot. Like, if anything, I feel like you should be getting called for more offensive fouls, and he's not. So I don't know. Like, I mean, that's why basketball is a little bit weird though. Like, I still have to give, I think overall best player this year, for example, like I think Luka's been the best player in this entire for both teams. It's just that he's not going to win this one, and he actually did kind of crumble emotionally on the big stage in Game 3.
I have an observation that I think is quite funny to make because it's one of those ones where I feel like people just didn't think it through. Like, as a random abstract tangent for a second, I'll just make a point to people that like one of the things that doing shows, for example, trains you to do is you don't just have the initial thought like, oh, that's funny, I think X. What you do is you sit and you think out all the other things. Well, what does that infer that I don't think, or what am I valuing, or why did I select this over the other? And the reason why if you do that, it's very valuable is sometimes you won't make a silly comment. Because I saw this thing, right? You might have seen this clip where I think it was after Game 3. I think it was Game 3 when they were up 3-0. There was an interview Tatum did after the game where they asked him and he really awkwardly just forced almost word for word that Kobe answer from the famous one in like 2009. You know, where he goes, job's not finished. He like basically did his version of that, right? Which if people don't know, he did it so awkwardly. It was just obvious, like he'd decided beforehand, like, I'm going to do the Kobe Bryant if anyone asks me. Like, it's just, right? But here's the point I'm going to make that I actually think will hopefully make people at least just smile and realize we can all be silly. So, you know, obviously everyone was doing that thing of like, who does he think he is? Kobe or something? You're not Kobe. You haven't even done what Kobe. But I just want to just tell them this. Remember, I am a massive Kobe fan. Well, it's not like that Kobe guy pretended to be like anyone else and did all their mannerisms. Guys, if there's one thing as Kobe fans we can't tell is like, why are you trying to pretend to be someone greater than you? He did that all with Michael Jordan. Like, if people don't know, he supposedly like was literally watching all those old classic Michael Jordan videos we've all seen, like Come Fly With Me and stuff, and literally like, you know, doing like the mannerisms and how to talk. Suppose why he even shaved his head. So like, all I'll say is, even though yes, I do think the way Tatum pulled it off is also part of why people don't like him. Like, you know what? I'm gonna say what no talking head has said, and it's just obvious when I say it. Here's why people don't like Tatum and Brown. down because they are actually just like fucking. The joke is, I'm surprised someone hasn't invoked some like fucked up racial angle, mate, because the thing about them is they're not in any way the classic like superstar African American guy. Like if you don't know, the Jaylen Brown guy sounds like someone out of a movie, mate. He sounds like fucking Iron Man or something. Like he's some like super genius, like, you know, helps like poppies out of trees on his part-time, could like be a doctor and save you while also being like, you know, fucking mega at basketball, which is like, are you even real? And then the Tatum one, if people don't know, I think the reason he pushes the Kobe angle so hard is he isn't Kobe. He's softer than fucking Charmin Ultra, isn't he? Like this guy is like, I bet he has his cocoa by 9 p.m. and he's in bed. Like he's just a really lovely guy, isn't he? You know what I mean? They don't. Neither of them really have that. Like, put it this way. Unlike Anthony Edwards, they don't have that dog in him or whatever the fuck. They're just kind of sort of like, I just like playing basketball professionally. And the problem is, I think people don't fuck with that, Maui. I know also, like they had an easier run and Tatum's play like shit, but I think actually part of it's like vibe check. I think people don't fuck with these guys. I think they don't vibe with them in a way, you know.
Yeah. I think one thing is that there was this little clip that I saw of Jaylen Brown and the way he described how he works and how he is as a person versus how Jayson Tatum is. And the thing with Jayson Tatum, and I will say this, like Kobe, MJ, they had so many great one-liners in the history of their careers that they dropped that like so many people just copy what they say. Like I could imagine like people like, I remember like I think Stewie 2K is probably taking Kobe lines.
No doubt, yes, sure.
You know, like actually when Fang was doing really well for Complexity, he had a couple quotes that was very similar to Kobe as well. And like a lot of people are just like, it's kind of just the knee-jerk response because it's like, also I'll say this. I think Al Horford was also interviewed after Game 3 about like taking it seriously for Game 4, and I was sitting there and he's like, you know, we're gonna come in with intensity or whatever, and like sorry, he got interviewed I think around the first quarter of Game 4, and he was saying something about like, oh, they're playing really well or whatever, and it's like, we can tell you guys aren't trying here, like we can tell you guys aren't really in this one, but the thing is like, you can never, ever say that. You cannot actually be honest.
Of course, yeah.
If you ever were honest and said, we're gonna win one of the next 3. Who cares about this one? You know, like that would look like if you collapse in a fashion that nobody ever had, and people rub that back in your face that you guys weren't trying on Game 4, and instead you say, no, we were trying, even though we all know you weren't, but you never admitted it. Then it would blow up to the degree that it's like, this guy is the biggest loser in the history of the sport.
I mean, if you remember, dude, didn't they almost do that? I think it was Klay Thompson, right? Wasn't it after the 3-1? I think Klay Thompson or someone in an interview did sort of like infer something like that, like, you know, they'd already won or it was easy or something. Yeah,
I think I'm pretty sure they like LeBron was salty or something.
Yeah, there you go, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks to lose again or something like that. Yeah, so he had some kind of line that was a little like shade at LeBron that he said. There's a couple other things that happened in the NBA that I think would be kind of fun to talk about. Go on. I don't know if okay, so I think the one that so that there's the biggest news articles that I saw were like, so Barkley though announcing his retirement.
Oh yeah, sure.
So do you see that one about like?
Do you know my problem with that though is if people don't know, it's actually why I'm shocked that he's made such a big deal about the fact that inside the NBA might not continue, etc. Because every time he signed a new contract, like the last 10 years or so, he always says he's going to retire the next year. Like that's actually a really famous thing he said a million times. So it's why in a way, like the only reason I buy it now is it looks like the actual show might just end. Like before that, I was always like, because here's the problem. I'll give you an obvious analogy if people know Counter-Strike. Richard Lewis has done the same thing a million times with events. Like every time he stops doing events for a while, he'll always be like, it's a young man's game, you know, I had my time. But then you notice the second he's back, he's like, right, I'm back now. Right, I'm back for real. And fuck all y'all. Exactly. Like suddenly you thought, Richard, I want to tell him, like, Richard, if it's a young man's game, by definition, you didn't go back in time, Benjamin Button style. So why are you doing it again? But it's like some people, Maui, in a way, I think some people just don't like to look too far in the future. So you just say like, oh, next year I'll quit. But you're really only going to think about when you get there, right? Do you believe it'll happen? You think it's over inside the NBA?
I think the way that the TNT contracts are working is like they have to split some people up or whatever. Like, some people. I thought Barkley had something signed with like he looked forward to the future that he signed a multi-year extension that doesn't matter if it's on TNT. He was going to do something with like just still if inside the NBA died. I think he even like a year ago made a thing that he made an extension that if that goes, I'm going to still do.
Oh, that's cool.
He made it. He made it. I think he made it in his clause last year that he had like a 3 or 4 year or something like an extension. but he said that if Inside the NBA goes away, I can leave and I can go to another show.
Right,
like
okay.
that was part of his because he didn't want to go down with the ship if TNT lose.
By the way, even though he wouldn't actually fit on any other show, guys, because his style essentially is what I do. It's just pure entertainment. It's not even really about analysis in basketball. But I will say that one segment is fucking amazing if no one's ever seen it. When they did that crossover episode, and you know, like when we had our E-League crossover, they did one of those with ESPN if no one saw this. And mate, the line Barkley drops is fucking fire. It's when he goes through all the people on the other desk, and the difference is they're all people he knows, like, you know, like Mike Wilborn, obviously been around the NBA for even like Woj. So, but then what he does is, obviously, if you don't know, guys, Charles Barkley's the kind of guy who ironically hates people like Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith, even though he doesn't seem to get he's in the same fucking lane. But it's okay. We put that at one side. It's just because they weren't players, guys. Let's be real, right? But then what's hilarious is he dropped one of the lines of the year, which is when he said to Stephen A. Smith, he goes, "Don't come over here doing all that like angry hollering or whatever." And then he said something fire like something like, "This isn't first take. This will be the first ass whooping you take," which is like, that is actually an amazing line. Like whoever wrote that line, like that's a mic drop and a half. Like that is actually fire. Whoever, I actually am low key jealous of how good that line is. That's actually amazing, mate. That's a banger.
That was funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's going to still be in the media in some sense. And I feel like TV is the most exciting in that capacity. He's done a couple podcasts, which I've listened to. Like,
yeah. It wasn't bad.
He's been featured by a couple different people here and there. And I feel like he's always really good. Like, and I think the thing is, like, he said, he's had this line, I think maybe 2 years ago before he signed the extension, was like, "No, I'm going to stop because, you know, the last thing I want is to die on TV. Like, I want to be fishing into the sunset or something." That's like, bro, like, come on. We all know being on TV or being in front of the camera is way more exciting than fishing. Of course. Like, your brain's gonna literally melt, rot. If you're just gonna sit there all day and just like, what, you're gonna like have chewing tobacco and just fish.
I'll tell you something. I'll flip this over to you, Maui, because I'm sure you can explain. Like this is happening to you right now. If there's one thing people don't admit when their broadcast talent is, most people, part of why they do it isn't the money, guys. It's actually the rush of being on camera and being in a big setting and being in a stage and that feeling of when you walk in the arena and you're about to do the thing and there's the buzz of the crowd. And I always point out, because during COVID, I think people even start to appreciate things like even just traveling to the country and checking into the hotel and seeing people from all these things, like they inspire in you like a feeling. And when you're not there, the FOMO is crazy. Even if it's, the funny thing is, Maui, even if it's a tournament you don't actually care about, it's just when it gets to the like semis, it's a really big match and there's that map thing, everyone gets that FOMO, right? That's why, as you're alluding to, he can say now, like, you know, maybe I'll just quit next year. The difference is if he was on that fishing boat, part of him next year is actually going to be thinking like, would be kind of cool to be doing the Western Conference. You know what I mean? He's going to think that. Come on, surely, right? Don't you think so?
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's how I feel to the point now where I'm actually considering: do I message Joe Miller about working an ESL Challenger event? You know, like I'm actually like, dude, I just want to be in a studio and talk some shit. You know, like I don't actually I mean, if he hired me for my day rate, I would do it, but I don't think he wants to do that. But yeah, no, that is how you feel, because it's like, as fun as some of the other little aspects of this industry are, like the streaming and making podcasts and stuff like that, they're not the same rush as like being in an arena with 10,000 fans. And that is why literally my favorite event was always Dallas. And some people think it's just because it's America. No, it's because I got to talk to the audience. There was like 5,000 to 7,000 people there, and when we went, our mics went out to the entire crowd. And I would always fuck with the crowd. I would always do it every time. And so like, I don't even necessarily need to be at like, I don't know, if an event doesn't have the talking to the crowd aspect, it's like, I still like being in a studio because I like the whole social environment of just sitting in a green room, watching some games, talking shit, you know, behind the scenes or whatever. Because as it stands right now, with me streaming all the time, it's like I'm talking like 90%, 95% of the shit I want to talk, but that last 5%, 10% of shit where it's like, I got some just scalding things to say. Like, I can't really say that because that stream is going out to the general public. And so those kind of private conversations, I definitely miss those. And I think Barkley also knows that, like, the environment of just going to work every day. And again, it's not about the money. It's like, for him, it's not about the money. For me in my career, it still is about, I still enjoy making money. But for him, he's got millions upon millions of dollars, more money than he's probably going to be able to spend, even if he went on vacation every day of his life for the rest of his life. So I think he's just going to miss that sort of setting. And that's why he's probably like, it's like, you know, for people that watch anime movies or whatever, like Miyazaki retired like 6 times.
Oh, sure.
Like, it's like, once you take a little bit of a break, I think they should just say, I'm going to take a hiatus.
Just say I'm taking a year off or something. Exactly, sabbatical or some shit. Yeah, exactly.
But I think they also secretly do like the attention of all the people then writing in the comment section. Like even Charles Barkley, I know he knows what the public thinks. Like he's been on podcasts and he said, I know what the public thinks. I know what they think about me here. And he doesn't even have a Twitter, but he's somehow getting all this information about what the public thinks. So I think he's doing some digging on his own at times. He's probably not like. It's not like you're reading HLTV forums. It's like you get the pulse. He's got his finger on the pulse, and he knows people miss him, and he knows that when he said that, he's gonna make people miss him.
By the way, since you referenced earlier that season where Kawhi Leonard obviously was the finals MVP and that the run back against the Heat, where that was the one where, if you remember, I mean, actually the Heat got to LeBron with the cramps in game 1 or whatever it was, if you remember that one, where the fucking Spurs easily handled them. I actually think that would even be the team I'd draw as a parallel to this Celtics team, Maui, because that team, if you remember, the main reason Kawhi won that is because of the lockdown job he did on LeBron. Actually, that team was another team that was mega deep. It was like everyone was doing 17 points a game, and it was more like he just had this really, again, by the way, great spacing, fabulous team, very well GM'd, coached. I actually think that's a better analogy, because to me, the reason why this team is mega, the Celtics, is it is the depth. They really are doing it. This is why it's funny that if this season actually might be the antidote, if you were like me and you've been hating on the small ball era of basketball, because between how the Celtics play and how the Timberwolves were GM'd, I actually think, isn't that what you want, guys? Don't you want big front lines and proper defense? Don't you want deep teams that play real basketball where you pass the ball and space it out and don't just play hero ball like fucking Trae Young or something? I actually think the Celtics team, that it's like I say, because of all the slander, I feel like people actually are missing, in a historical context, this is a really good team. It just doesn't have, and this is what all the young fans can't handle, it just doesn't have that one superstar who dominates everything and has the ball in his hand all the time. In fact, the joke is, the discussion that shows you how crazy the Celtics run has been is realistically, in theory, depending on what happens in the next game, it actually could be any of the 3 stars on the Celtics could be the fucking MVP. They really could, if someone just pops off in this last game and had a 35% performance. I think even fucking Drew Holiday potentially could claim it with his defensive job. It's just a mega deep team. It's just not Michael Jordan's basketball, you know what I mean? Everything can't be like that. Some teams have to be Astralis, if you know what I mean. Not everyone can have simple. It's not just about watching simple, guys. Come on. That's not basketball.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when Leonard won Finals MVP, he was one of the 5 lowest at the time.
Oh, it must be.
Scoring efforts. He had 17.8 points, and
the irony is him and Iguodala already basically got it for defending LeBron. That's just obviously the reason they both won.
That's great. It's a crazy reason to win. Iguodala at the time got less than Kawhi did, but it's basically they could just stop the freight train.
Yes.
Exactly. They were able to redirect it. They actually did the trolley problem in the NBA Finals. They just pulled the lever a little bit.
Yes.
Because they still obviously were still able to score. I mean, that's true. I think the narrative there is and that's why I think because fans always just want controversy and conflict, and we all kind of secretly crave that a little bit. And I think that when it comes to Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, that's kind of why people want to bag it on Tatum, because it's he's not a real superstar. And it's I kind of don't really see Tatum as a superstar either, and I never really sold him as that. He's an all-star. He's one of the best, definitely one of the best 10 players in the league, without a doubt. It's kind of where he falls on that. I wouldn't say he's he's not in the Embiid territory. He's not in the Jokic territory.
But I'm with you. If you flip the teams and made him do what Luka has to do, he wouldn't do it.
No,
he's not that player. Sure.
Nah, yeah, and that's why, it's a Celtics. It's a team effort, and I feel like.
By the way, even though it's a really, really dark joke, I appreciate dark humor, Maui, so I'll give it to you. Even though it might indeed be too soon, I will say whoever came up with that joke, which is obviously a million people made this joke, but it is a funny one. When Jerry West died, the joke people put was he was such a Celtics hater. He was fuck it, I'm not watching him win another banner, which is bear in mind, he was really old, guys. He was his 80s or something. It's not like it's a guy 50, but it's he's actually the sort of age you do that. Yeah. So bear in mind, he did live a very long life. I think that's a funny joke. joke. It's rough, but it is funny. It is pretty good.
It's not the worst thing.
It's pretty good.
It's definitely not the worst thing in the world. I liked it resurfaced again after Jerry West passed away. The fact that he called out JJ Reddick.
Oh, mate, the way he called him out. Like, the joke is he did it. That's how people like Simple think they're calling you and me out. But the difference is his was fire, wasn't it? Like when he said, what did you do? Average 14 points a game or something. Like that was.
It's like 12 or something.
It was fire. It was fire.
I actually determined the outcome of games.
Yes.
You just scored 10 points or whatever it was.
Oh, and by the way, he also had one of the mic drops of the century with that line where he goes, because obviously, remember as well, Jerry West comes he literally comes from like fucking some like country area or something, doesn't he? Doesn't he come from like some fucking farm type place or whatever? So obviously he's not like a ghetto type player,
West
right?
Virginia.
And so what's hilarious is he had one of the best mic drops with a mix of boomer humor I've ever heard. It's that one where he said, all the players now are like, he's a dog. And he goes, well, I was a wolf. I used to eat dogs. Which is like, even though that sounds boomer, it's also fire though. And like in a movie, that'd be a fucking sick line. What are you talking about? That's fire.
No, I'm honestly like West and what West said to Reddick is so apt also, and it's also I kind of can't believe Reddick had the like NBA nephew take.
Oh, it's wild, isn't it?
Something like that he was playing against plumbers, and it's like, yeah, like Reddick, like for your millions of dollars you're making both on TV now and when you were playing the game, it's like these people had to actually work jobs in the off season just to stay in shape and to feed their families. Like Jerry West was born in 1938. Like the economy was completely different of this game, and if people like West weren't there playing and he wasn't just like creating this kind of phenom sort of sensation in the 60s and 70s, like there's no star power that would have carried this league. And if it really truly were just plumbers and everything like that, nobody would have watched the game, and nobody would be watching the game today. If these are just people that are just playing rec ball in their off time. It's like, that's such a asinine comment. And it's like Reddick sometimes can be something about Reddick right now is like he can be that kind of like glasses meme of like, but he can also just sometimes be the actual like, he says the shit all the time that's like, I'm self-aware. I know that the sports industry is all about controversy. And then he says asinine shit like that. And it's like, what are you talking? You perpetuate it. You're not better than it. Like you're all part of this one entertainment product, and you're on ESPN, my guy. Like they want people to talk like Stephen A. Smith. That's why they pay them lots of money, and you probably want that.
I've got one last point, so I'll tie it to what you were going to say there, actually, which is I have a theory about that, because it's actually something I've experienced from games like League of Legends and other games, right? Which is, it goes like this. So I often say the reason my main interest in League of Legends has nothing to do with the game. It's that because it's one of the only esports games that had almost like uniformly equal like uptake in all major regions. It's the only one where you never have to ask the question that you do, for example, in Counter-Strike. So I'll give you the example in Counter-Strike. If people don't know, in Valorant, their most recent international tournament was won by a Korean team, believe it or not. Well, obviously, the Korean team we had was that MVP team, and they weren't even dreaming of winning a tournament. Like, it was never even plausible. So the difference is, even though people don't think about this, I've actually told people who I know actually fuck with Korea, know what Korean esports is like Get Right, for example. I told them back in the day, yeah, but here's the bomber Get Right, is you're amazing. Like, maybe you're the best Counter-Strike player ever, but for all we know, maybe like the second best Counter-Strike player ever was a Korean guy, and he just played League of Legends or StarCraft or something. So we never got to know he was that good. Well, basically, the point is, in theory, this is where my actual like principle differs from other people. So what people do is they take that logic of like, right, you need everyone to play the game to maximize the superstars, right? But this is where I think I disagree fundamentally with most people. Most people act like it's just a numbers game. Like if you can get, say, like 1 million people in a country play a game, their logic would be it eventually means your chances to get like a faker, like the greatest player ever in League of Legends, your chances go up, obviously, because, you've got more people it could be. But I think the flaw in that logic is this. It almost implies that for every X amount, you will get a faker. And I actually think that's the point I want to make here about the 60s and the 70s, Maui. What JJ Reddick is missing is this. He's right, actually, in the sense that Jerry West was pointing out, which is if JJ Reddick himself played in the 60s, he wouldn't be Jerry West. He might be a good player, by the way. Maybe if there's less talent in a smaller league, maybe he would be slightly better than he was stars in the modern day. Maybe I'll even give him that olive branch. But the point he's missing is exactly that, Maui. He wouldn't, though, have been Jerry West. What he doesn't get is this. A Jerry West doesn't come because you have 10 million people play for you. You either get one or you don't. Like players that are like that exceptional, Wilt Chamberlain. By the way, even modern day players, LeBron. It doesn't matter how many players you get now. You're not guaranteed to get a LeBron. Like those players are crazy outliers. So what I think he's missing is what I just said earlier, which is it's really not the case. Like the best example ever probably is Wilt Chamberlain, Maui, because think about this for a second. Is the only reason Wilt Chamberlain played basketball, guys, because basketball was really popular? He's like 7'9" or something ridiculous. He's not really, you know what I mean? Like that person was going to try basketball. Let's be real, right? So the point is you were always going to get Wilt Chamberlain. Like if you didn't, maybe, I don't know, he would have done like fucking high jump. You know what I mean? Like he was going to be an athlete.
I think he did.
Yeah, he did a whole bunch of things. Yeah. So the point is certain people who are like super phenoms were going to play anyway. Same like Michael Jordan or something. You know what I mean? These guys are insane athletes. Like they would have played some sport and been some kind of star. So that's where I think JJ Reddick fails. Because essentially, Maui, I'll give the Counter-Strike equivalent. It's why, like for example, like ROPS, okay, comes from Estonia. Right, we're not all like, oh, guys, we need to put more investment into Estonia because if we can get like another 100,000 players, we'll get like 2 more ROPs. Like, you don't. You either get ROPs or you don't. Like, he's not anything to do with the Estonian scene, is he? If anything, by definition, he is the ultimate outlier. Like, he's the one guy who's way better than them, and there isn't another ROPs as far as we know. Like, there's some all right players. So, yeah, I think people just go too far with that one because I do think that is the ultimate nephew take, which I think looks embarrassing. It's when a nephew goes, they pick a random player who's like, you know, like the 11th player on a roster, and then they make it out like for real. If you put him in a time machine, Bill and Ted style, he's coming out and he's like, you know, like fucking putting it through his legs like Iverson on like Bob Cousy and then like 360 windmilling it. It's like, he wouldn't really be doing that, you idiot. It's like that nephew take is the bad one. Like, I'm with you that the superstars now are really good and that maybe like the bottom end of the talent of the NBA wasn't that good. You might be right there. That just seems logical. But the idea that like the superstars, like, first of all, they weren't really playing plumbers. That's more like the 50s guys and 40s. And secondly, people like Wilt Chamberlain, it's not because they played in 1960 they were really good. Just go watch the film, guys. Like, he would be amazing now. Come on.
Yeah, no, also, like, for the way you put it with the way that, like, you're not just going to get these, like, right side of the bell curve people like Jerry West. Like, those are supposed to be the people that are athletic freaks. Like, Jerry West was 6'3", and he was benched from his freshman team or his like high school team for being too short, and then he had a little bit of a growth spurt. Like that dude had to work through basically being told you're not good enough to play basketball in the 50s when there's like no incentive to play that game at all. Like you literally like if you actually just chose straight up, you're like, oh, I got benched on this. I guess I'm just gonna study finance. You're probably he probably could have made more money. He probably could have made more money until he actually until basketball got bigger and he got some of the media deals that he did. Not that I imagine that. I actually don't know how much Jerry West ever made in his life.
It can't be much. It can't be much. I'd guess like, no joke, it's probably like 2 million for his whole career or something mental. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, even as a coach and as a player, as an executive, I imagine.
Oh, he probably got paid as an exec. Sure, that's modern day shit. Yeah.
He definitely made more as an exec than he did as a player, because that's like 50 years later, 40 years later. So. I mean, again, like, yeah, Reddick, yes, like, they're not wrong that, like, if DeMar DeRozan played 40 years ago, he would look like Michael Jordan. That's true. That is actually true. But, like, you have to, like, transpose the work ethic that person had and kind of, like, you almost, like, take them on where they're on the bell curve today, and then you have to, like, put them on that same spot on the bell curve back then. And even if you give them a little bit of a benefit of a doubt, it's not like they're not becoming world beaters or anything like that.
Right. We'll probably now just spend the last half an hour talking about Caitlin Clark.